Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining me today. This is the lovely podcast, The Endurance of Labor Laws, and we are going to take a look at the American Federation of Teachers, also known as AFT. So let's start with the basics of this union. And here we go. So it was founded in April 15th, 1916. It is headquartered currently in Washington, D.C. It says it has 1.7 million members, and it is affiliated with AFL-CIO and the Education International. And so I'm going to go ahead and read through some of this history. So let's go ahead and get started on this one. And this one is different. It's a separate union. The other union that we looked at that dealt with education and teachers was the National Education Association, also known as NEA. So these are two totally different ones. So it says here, the American Federation of Teachers is the second largest teachers' labor union in America, the largest being the National Education Association. The union was founded in Chicago with Margaret Haley credited as its founder and first leader. About 60% of AFT's membership works directly in education, with the remainder of the union's members composed of paraprofessionals and school-related personnel, local, state, and federal employees, higher education faculty and staff, and nurses and other healthcare professionals. The AFT has, since its founding, affiliated with trade union federations. Until 1955, the American Federation of Labor, and now the AFL-CIO. Now, one thing that I don't understand about some of these unions is that if they're founded for like teachers or for steel workers, I don't understand why they're looping in nurses and other types of employees, because that's not their industry. The only thing I can think of, the reason why they do that is because they want the money from the membership dues and they want power in terms of their labor union. So the more members that they have, the more power that they have. And that kind of concerns me when they have 1.7 million members, because just think how much money they're bringing in from membership dues and where they're donating it and sending the money to. Because I guarantee you it's probably not staying local within their communities, which is where it needs to stay. So then let's take a look at the history. It says AFT was founded in Chicago, Illinois on April 15th, 1916. Charles Stillman was the first president and Margaret Haley was the national organizer. On May 9th, 1916, the American Federation of Labor chartered the AFT. By 1919, AFT had 100 local affiliates and a membership of approximately 11,000 teachers, which amounted to 1.5% of the nation's teaching force. In its early days, AFT distinguished itself from the National Education Association by its exclusion of school administrators from membership. Now that I agree with, because school administrators, if you remember from one of my previous podcasts with this, the word administrator is not a very positive word to have, because administrators typically are bureaucrats that just get paid to be professional paper pushers. They're usually overpaid. They usually have a job title that it's not equivalent to the work. So basically they're not doing the grunt work. So I'm not a big fan of administrators, and I'm not a fan of them being a part of decision making, because usually they're not the ones doing the work. They are not typically on the front line of any type of labor, whether it's a labor union or if it's in the private sector. They're usually not the person that you need to ask. You need to ask the actual workers, whether they're union members or non-union members, because then you'll find out what's really going on within that industry and within that organization. Because administrators, they typically act like HR departments, where they just cover the posterior of whoever they're working for. They're basically, their loyalty is paid loyalty. It's not real loyalty, is what I'm trying to say. It goes on to say, facing opposition from politicians and boards of education, membership in AFT declined to 7,000 by 1930. During this period, the organization had little impact on local or national education policy. AFT membership climbed during the Great Depression, reaching 33,000 by 1939. During the 1930s, AFT, whose members had historically been primary school teachers, saw influential college professors join the union. That's concerning, because college professors are not known for being kind. They're not known for actually teaching good schoolwork. They're not known for actually teaching what students are supposed to know, and we see that in our current education programs in colleges. There are a lot of colleges that are becoming extremely liberal, and I think that's wrong, because when you go to college, as a student, you're there to learn about the history of the country. You're not supposed to be brainwashed, whether to think liberal or conservative. You're there to really discover yourself. And so if you have, influential college professors, whoever they are, like, I could care less if someone is influential. That means nothing to me. Because I believe in your individual rights. And, we all have a mind, we all have a brain, and we need to utilize that for our lives and for our benefits. I think when you have too many people that are influential joining an organization, that it's kind of like they take it over. Because they think their opinion is more important than someone that they think is below them, is the thing. Because they don't really believe in equality. And that's what you see with these higher education type of labor forces. Goes on to say, also during the 1930s, the Communist Party gained influence within AFT. That's concerning. I'm not surprised by that because of what we've seen in the past with these labor unions. In 1941, under pressure from the AFL, the union ejected 3 local unions in New York City and Philadelphia, including its prominent early member, the New York City Teachers Union, AFT Local 5, for being communist-dominated. Well, I'm surprised they did that. So it goes on to say the charter revocations represented nearly a third of the union's national membership. The 1940s were marked by a series of teacher strikes, including 57 strikes that occurred from 1946 through 1949. That is way too many strikes to be having in that short a period of time. That's really concerning. Because it's the students that suffer, not the teachers with this. It's the students that are not getting their education. By 1947, AFT had a membership of 42,000. The 1960s and 1970s also saw numerous teacher strikes, including 1,000 strikes involving more than 823,000 teachers between 1960 and 1974. That is ridiculous and pathetic. Seriously. Including 1,000 strikes and a little over 800,000 teachers went on strike. I mean, talk about not really caring about doing your job. And not caring about your industry and caring about the students. Like, if you want to get something done within your job, you still have to do the work. You still have to do it. I mean, that's just very disappointing to me that teachers would do that. And I think that this is why we have some problems with the Department of Education. I really believe that to be so. It goes on to say AFT membership was 59,000 in 1960, 200,000 in 1970, and 550,000 in 1980. That's concerning because it's growing really fast, really rapidly, and for probably strange reasons. In 2017, membership was around 1.6 million, and the union had due income of $35 million. That is a lot of power and a lot of money, and that greatly concerns me with this. Because if they've got communist problems from the very beginning of their organization, or close to the beginning of the organization, of when they founded, you're dealing with a lot of money, a lot of power that is probably not going to be used very well. And you can see that with all the strikes that they had. Goes on to say, since 1977, AFT has published a quarterly magazine for teachers covering various issues about children and education called American Educator. Well, what I find very interesting about that is they're publishing a quarterly magazine, but yet they're still going on strike. And then they're talking about various issues with children and education, but yet they're not doing their job. Because if you have over 800,000 people going on strike, 1,000 strikes, that tells me they're not doing their job. Because they're not showing up to work. So, I mean, what are they talking about in their magazine if they're not doing their job? I mean, are they just patting themselves on the back because they're in a union? Like, that makes no sense to me whatsoever. Because, how can you promote yourself when you're not doing the work? That would be like me saying I worked for a newspaper, but I go on strike and I never actually write anything, I never put anything in the newspaper. Yet I'm expecting to get a reward. I'm expecting to get a raise. I'm expecting to be noticed and win like a Pulitzer Prize or something. Like, if you don't do the work, if you don't do the labor, then guess what? You're not doing the work and you're not doing the labor. So how is that good for the private sector or the public sector or for our kids in this country? It's not good. In 1998, the membership of the NEA rejected a proposed merger with AFT. I don't blame them. The AFT's membership is half that of the NEA. Then it goes on to specific people here. So first we're going to talk about Albert Schenker. In 1974, Albert Schenker was elected president of AFT. He served in this role until his death on February 22nd, 1997. For 27 years, Schenker wrote a weekly column entitled Where We Stand. Really? Wow. Probably you don't stand hardly anywhere if you're not showing up to work. It says here that ran as an advertisement in the New York Times. Schenker was an early advocate of charter schools. I'm surprised by that. Proving me wrong. Because charter schools are good. Because it holds teachers accountable for stuff. He also called for a national competency test for teachers. Whoa! That is so different than what's going on now. Merit pay for teachers, okay. And more rigorous requirements for high school graduation. I'm surprised by this. Wow, okay. He must have ruffled some feathers. During his tenure as AFT president, Schenker was jailed twice for leading illegal strikes. Wow. Okay. And just so you know, when you have an illegal strike, it usually means something pretty bad happened, or they're not doing it the way that is considered legal, whether state or federal, because you have to abide by both laws on that. The next person is Sandra Feldman. Sandra Feldman served as AFT's president from 1997 to 2004. Feldman helped craft the No Child Left Behind Act. Wow, how crappy. I would not want to be known for that at all, because that's one of the worst acts ever. I hated it. If you want to go back and listen to one of my previous podcasts talking about that, it was so horrible here in Oklahoma and other states. Wow. Seriously, I would not want my name associated with that, because it was horrible. And if she helped to craft that, what does that say about how she really views things? And she's incompetent for the job, because that act ruined so many schools. It was pathetic and horrible. The next person is Edward J. Mcelroy. Edward J. Mcelroy, the AFT's Secretary Treasurer since 1992, was elected president of the AFT in 2004, replacing Feldman. That's probably a good thing. On February 12, 2008, Mcelroy announced he would retire at the union's regularly scheduled biennial convention in July. On July 14, 2008, Randy Weingartner was elected to succeed him. So next we're going to talk about Randy Weingartner. So it says on July 14th, 2008, Randy Weingartner, then the president of the UFT, was elected to succeed Mcelroy as AFT president. That's one thing that concerns me about some of these organizations is they just bounce people of power around instead of getting some new blood in there. So I like to see a transition of power, not a conquest of power, because otherwise you're not going to see good things happen within your organization, whether it's a labor union or a company. Because it's almost like they just continue to promote themselves, just have that cushy bureaucrat job. So it goes on to say in September 2008, she announced the launch of the Aft Innovation Fund, a union-led private foundation-supported effort to provide grants to AFT unions to develop and implement innovations in education. Wow, what a BS line. Okay, so then it goes on to say, in 2014, Weingartner announced that AFT was ending a 5-year funding relationship between the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the Aft Innovation Fund. According to Department of Labor filings, Weingartner earned nearly $560,000 in total compensation during the 2013-2014 school year. Wow. That is way too much money to be paid in education. That's what I was talking about when you talk about useless bureaucrats that get into positions of power and they're just professional paper pushers. You know what I want to ask this person? What about having a teacher from Chicago or Detroit that hasn't seen a raise in years make $560,000 for a couple of years? How about that? Someone that doesn't make a drop in the bucket. That's what I mean. Like, there is corruption within these unions, and there is corruption when you're dealing with this kind of money, especially when you're dealing with administrators and when you're dealing with the higher-ups that are on these boards, these board members. They don't really care about their people. It's like once they get into a position of power, all they care about is just sucking it dry of its money. It's very corrupt. So next we'll go on to political activities. It says, since 1980, AFT and the NEA have contributed nearly $57.4 million to federal campaigns. That's disturbing. And to me, that rings of being illegal, because that's not right to do that. An amount that is about 30% higher than any single corporation or other union. That's disturbing. About 95% of political donations from teachers' unions have gone to Democrats. That's why we should not have unions giving any monies to any political party. I don't care if it's Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, whatever the case may be, because that's trying to swing a vote. You can't buy votes in this country. The American people cannot be bought and sold like livestock. We are worth more than that. And for these unions to act like that, to act like they can buy and sell votes, which is what they're technically doing when they're donating money to a political party, that's what they're doing. That's why it's wrong. And it's misappropriation of funds. Because those membership dues should never go to political platforms. They need to be used for their members, help those teachers get better raises. Why not use those membership dues to help cushion the lack of income for teachers that are not paid very well in poorer states? Why not allocate those funds that way? I would be okay with that. And I'm a Republican and a capitalist. I mean, seriously, if you say you're going to help your teachers, then you need to put your money where your big mouth is. That's what I say. It goes on to say, in 2008, AFT provided a campaign contribution of $1.7 million, a little over $1.7 million to Hillary Clinton, and a little over $1.9 million to Barack Obama. That's concerning. It goes on to say, in July 2015, AFT endorsed Democrat Hillary Clinton in the 2016 presidential race. I'm not surprised. Clinton and AFT President Randy Weingartner are longtime friends. Thick as thieves. AFT's officials' endorsement of Clinton caused controversy among some AFT members who felt that the endorsement came too soon and did not reflect the wishes of rank-and-file AFT members. See what I mean about this? Some of whom support Bernie Sanders. See, that's why it's wrong for unions to support specific candidates like this, because it ostracizes other members within the union. And then it makes it feel like their voice is not being heard, which is exactly what happened here. I don't blame those members for feeling irritated about that, because that is such a slap in the face to these members that are part of this union, and yet their union is basically trying to tell them who to vote for. That's why what is happening here is not right. It's not fair to the union members that actually pay those monies. Members' dues underwrite much of AFT's political activities. Why am I not surprised? In 2015, 4 California teachers sued AFT and its California unit, the California Federation of Teachers, over the use of member dues for political activities. Good for you. Amen. Call them out on this stuff. Because here's the thing. I may not be such a huge fan of unions right now, but still, if you're in a union, you have every right to call people out on misappropriations of your monies that you donate or give to your union. You have every right to fight for that. Because some of this stuff is so shady and unethical, someone's got to stand up for this, or stand up against it and call them out on it, and it might as well be the members that are noticing this stuff within these unions. It says the plaintiffs argued that unions were violating their constitutional right to free speech by forcing them to either support union-favored causes and candidates or lose access to important job benefits such as disability and life insurance. Wow. See what I mean? This is what I was talking about. In 2018, the landmark Supreme Court ruling in Janus versus AFS-CME resolved this matter, concluding that public sector union fees violate the First Amendment, compelling non-members to subsidize private speech on matters of substantial public concern. Unions will subsequently need to gain the affirmative consent of individual teachers before enrolling them in the union. Sometimes you got to take it to court. That's just how it is. And you know what? You have every right to do so, because that's why we have court systems in our country. That's why we have 3 branches of government within the United States. And sometimes you have to take things to court. And be careful about signing arbitration agreements. Be careful about that. Like if ever someone says, this is a side note, if ever someone says you have to sign this in order to be a member or in order to have this job, that's a bold-faced lie straight out of the depths of hell. You cannot be forced into signing something that you do not want to sign. They cannot force you to do that. And what arbitration agreements are is that's basically where if you sign that and something happens at your job or within the organization that you're a part of and you need to take them to court, arbitration agreements state that you will not take them to court without first trying to resolve it. However, arbitration usually sabotages your court case. So just know, you don't have to sign those contracts. Not at all. I say fight it. Get a good lawyer and scare them with it. Just be like, no, you want to play that game? Here's what my lawyer says. I'm not always a big fan of lawyers, but when you need them, they're there for you. And you need to always know a good lawyer. And that means not a shady lawyer. That means a good lawyer that understands the rights and the amendments of the Constitution of the United States so that they can defend you and your job and the security of your future. That's what that means. Okay, so let's move on to activities. So it says here, the AFT was one of the first trade unions to allow African Americans and minorities to become full members of their trade union. In 1918, AFT called for equal pay for African American teachers, the election of African Americans to local school boards, and compulsory school attendance for African American children. In 1919, AFT called for equal educational opportunities for African American children, and in 1928 called for the social, political, economic, and cultural contributions of African Americans to be taught in the public schools. In 1951, the union stopped chartering segregated locals. It filed, the font's a little weird. It filed an amicus brief. I'm not sure what that means. I'm not familiar with that word, but it's AMICUS brief in the 1954 U.S. Supreme Court desegregation case Brown versus Board of Education. In 1957, the AFT expelled all locals that refused to desegregate. This resulted in the loss of over 7,000 members. In 1963, the AFT actively supported the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. It goes on to talk about collective bargaining. It says by the late 1940s, AFT was slowly moving toward collective bargaining as an official policy. By the end of the 1970s, collective bargaining agreements covered 72% of public school teachers. Then it goes here to active shooter drills. It says in 2020, the union, along with the National Education Association, issued a report expressing opposition to active shooter drills being held in schools, calling on the drills to be revised or eliminated. I think how dumb and stupid can you be? Here's the thing. We have gun violence in this world. It's not just in the United States, but it's in our world. And unfortunately, when Columbine happened in the United States, that's when shooter drills started to happen in terms of retraining teachers, and we had to adjust with our society. We have to have proper protocols to be prepared for things like this. I just think it's very interesting that this union and this other union, they are against, how do I word this? They are against doing these type of drills, even though we need to have these. The teachers need to be properly trained, and the students need to know what to do. So that way you avoid scary situations, and when you know what to do in those situations, you're better prepared. I think it's quite evil and weird and also incompetent for a union, especially a teachers' labor union, to be against better preparing the staff and the students just in case an event like that happens. And I'll make an example or give an analogy here that has nothing to do with school shootings. As you know, I'm from Oklahoma, and we have tornadoes like crazy here. Well, we do practice drills. We have a practice siren where I live every Saturday at 12 noon. They practice the siren to make sure that we can all hear it. And also, sometimes, whenever we are in school, or at least when I was in school, public schools, we had fire drills every year. We had tornado drills every year. We had them multiple times a year, actually. I think it was like 2 or 3 times. And the fire department would come out and would check the alarm system for the fire and for the tornado sirens within our school. And the teachers, it would also help them, especially new teachers, fresh out of school or fresh done with their, training assignment. It helped them to know what to do in those situations so that way they're not fearful. Regardless of whether they're male or female, this helps put them in control of the situation instead of the situation having control over them. So, I'll give another example. I remember when I was in grade school, I was in the 4th grade, and this really fun kid and his family moved here from California. They were such a hoot. They were so sweet. And I remember he came to school the first week, and then had a nice weekend, and then he showed up on Monday, and he said, "Oh my goodness, you guys have tornadoes every weekend on Saturday at 12 noon?" I was like, "What?" And we're like, no, that's just a practice siren. Well, no one ever told him or his family that, which the neighbors probably should have told them about that. But, once they knew what to do in those situations, then they weren't scared anymore. But if you don't know what to do and where to go in your house if there's a tornado, or if you don't know where to go in your building, then you are setting yourself up for failure, because the horrible thing about tornadoes is not necessarily the storm itself, but it's the debris that is picked up and blown around by the wind. And these are high velocity winds. Like, most people die from getting struck by debris, whether it's glass, wood, metal, pipes, who knows what all is, anything that is, whether it's small or large, can be picked up by a very powerful tornado, and it can hit you and kill you. So, it's important to know what you're dealing with. It's the same thing when you have a shooter situation. I would think that you would want to do shooter drills. And as I've said in a previous podcast, when we first started doing these drills in school, it was a little scary, but we were kids. But we also knew that Columbine had just happened. And it was just something new that you did. Like, now we're having to practice for a shooter drill, where we practice our fire drills, we practice tornado drills. That's just what you do. You practice so you know what to do in those situations, so the situations do not dominate you. And I would think that if these unions actually cared about the safety of children, they would not be against these drills in any way, shape, or form. But unfortunately, these unions, they act like they have all the say on this planet, and they do not. And they act like they are in charge of every school in this country. They are not. It is the parents that are in charge of these schools, especially public schools, because public schools are funded by public funds, meaning our tax dollars. So wherever you live, if you are a parent, you for sure have a huge say-so in that school. Don't ever let a teacher tell you that you don't know what you're doing and the school system belongs to the teachers. No, it belongs to the parents, because the parents are in charge of the child, not the teachers. And definitely not the school system, and definitely not the Department of Education. So for sure, if you have a child, know that you have rights, and that child belongs to you. It does not belong to the state. It does not belong to the federal government. So really, take heart, stand up for yourself, and stand up for your child, and do not feel bad for standing up for yourself and your child. And also, because when you stand up for your child and you stand up for yourself, you're standing up for your community and your state. And you're defending the rights of the individual, but as a collective when you come together as parents. Don't ever underestimate how strong your voice is. Don't ever do that. Don't ever throw away your voice just because some union or some organization that works in the public sector likes to act like they're all that in a bag of chips when they're not. Like, technically, anyone that works in the public sector, we are their boss. Because we, the citizens of the United States, we're in charge of this country. Not these little pockets of, powerful groups. That's why you have to be careful when you have groups like this that get really large really quick. I was very concerned about the numbers with this. And also that they have problems with communism. I mean, that is a concern. Because it means that they're going to be heavy-handed, because that's what communists do. They're very heavy-handed in a lot of things because they truly do not respect anybody else's rights except their own. Because they think their rights and what they say and what they think is more important than everybody else, when that's not equality. That's favoritism, that's nepotism, and that has no place in the United States of America. No place whatsoever. So then it says, it has a little segment here. It says, share my lesson. And it says, in 2012, AFT partnered with Britain's TES Connect to create a curriculum sharing website called Share My Lesson. The AFT and TES invested $10 million to develop the site. Really, I find it very odd it costs that money to help with a website. I would say follow the money on that one. Big time. Then it says, in 2010, 4 American film documentaries, most notably Waiting for Superman, portrayed AFT as hurting children by opposing charter schools and protecting incompetent teachers. Well, I can speak from experience here in Oklahoma. We've had some problems with the public school system targeting our charter schools because the public school system wants those tax dollars. So again, if you're not aware of how tax dollars work in regards to public school systems, here's what happens. So tax dollars that we pay, and we all pay taxes, whether you work for a school or whether you don't, or whether you have kids or not, we're all paying tax dollars, right? Well, for every kid that's in the public school system, public tax dollars are allotted to that school district, basically on behalf of that student, to help cover the expenses of educating that child. Well, there were parents, and there are parents, that are not happy with the public school system. I don't blame them. And they want to put their children in charter schools. And so when parents do that, it takes away, it's supposed to take away the tax dollars for that child from the public school system and move it over to the charter school system to help offset the cost of that child's education. Well, the public school system still wants those monies. Even though the kid's not even there in the public school system, they want the money, which is very unethical. It's technically illegal, and it looks really bad on public school systems, because not all public school systems are bad, but they tend to have just as much greed as any kind of corporate, mega, unethical corporate company in the private sector. Because oftentimes what people try and say is they try and demonize Wall Street, but yet they're not willing to demonize the bad stuff that goes on in the public sector. It's like, you know what, financial fraud and financial greed, it can happen anywhere, anytime. It's not just the private sector. It can also happen in the public sector. And if anything, when it happens in the public sector, meaning dealing with our tax dollars, there are a lot of cover-ups because there are a lot of people that don't want the public sector to look bad. Whereas if you really wanted things to be run well and to be successful in the public sector, you would expose that greed. You would expose that mismanagement of public funds, because first of all, you would want that behavior to stop. Number two, you're supposed to report things like that when you're dealing with tax dollars, because it's not their money, it's the taxpayers' money. So any kind of fraud is supposed to be reported to the appropriate agency. And also, it's important for things to be corrected so that you can move forward into the future and have a better idea of how to handle those funds appropriately so that you don't continue to have mismanagement of funds and you don't have illegal, fraudulent behavior when it comes to monies. And plus, you would also want your organization to look better. Because if you really want your organization to look good, then you would do things on the up and up and not try and cover things up. But unfortunately, with things like this, there's usually cover-ups, there's usually misappropriation of funds, and it's kind of tick for tack. I've never been a fan of tick for tack because it's an auditor's nightmare, first of all. And secondly, it's just unethical behavior. And it's just like, I know I'm 37 years old. I'm not as old as probably some of these people that are in these unions that are higher up, but still, it's just kind of like, regardless of your age or your occupation, you should want people to do the right thing no matter what, because it's the right thing to do. You have to have ethics, morals, and values in order for things to run properly, in order to have a well-oiled machine. Otherwise, it's going to fall apart. So why not just make it easy on society and just do the right thing the first time? That's typically how I think about things. But anyway, this is a kind of medium to short podcast. But I hope that you enjoyed it, and I definitely learned a lot from this myself. The next trade union or labor union we will look at is the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. So that one should be interesting. It goes back to 1891. So if you have any questions, concerns, or feedback, do message me. You can go directly to the message link on the podcast website, or you can email me directly at yourlaborlaws@gmail.com. And again, that's yourlaborlaws@gmail.com. So until next time, I pray that you're happy, healthy, and whole, and that you enjoy your day, your week. And this is definitely a interesting journey, learning things that I never knew before. And it's definitely a new type of education. I will say that. So until next time, have a wonderful day. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.